Hello, viewers. Well, about 10 days ago now, as I record this, Nintendo obviously showed off the Nintendo Switch 2, showed all of the elements which I talked about on the previous video, and there was the issue of pricing. And I thought to myself, well, it's quite a topical issue, and it could just completely consume everything that's in a discussion, and really it's a discussion about the wider industry. So I thought I'd talk a bit about game pricing here today, and some of you may agree, some of you may not agree, some of you might appreciate my perspective, and some of you may not. But I think either way, the world is changing, and so I thought I'd go through a bit of a history of game pricing here and talk about the conversion in terms of money as it used to be. So, bit of background on me. I've been playing games obviously for over 40 years, and back then we used to buy games on our Amstrad, our Spectrum and our Commodore, and they were generally between £1.99 and £9.99 for the more expensive titles, and for a compilation pack £14.99. That could include 4 expensive titles like RoboCop, something like that, which would have been, so I never owned RoboCop because it was just too expensive, though I think the only compilation pack I probably bought was the Domark Star Wars arcade trilogy, of which I have the arcade machine sitting there now. That was the most expensive game I bought at the time. The thing about money is it was very simple to make a game back then. 2-3 people could make a game. There was no real testing. Most of the games were crap. They were poorly tested, kicked out the door. And for me, that's all I could afford. I'd play these games and get as far as I could get, and enjoyed them for what they were, though we always knew how limited they were, especially when you saw the emergence of the Atari ST and the Amiga and the arcade machines, which were light years ahead of anything we had in the home at the time. But we enjoyed it for what it was. Moving on to the Mega Drive era, and games went up in price massively. You're talking about, I suppose in a way America was slightly different because in America they didn't really have the home computers like we had. They went from a NES, which had expensive games, to a Super Nintendo. For me, going from a home computer to a Mega Drive was vast. You're going from $1.99, $4.99 games to $39.99. It's a large amount of money. Let's just take a look at what $39.99 was. Let's take a look at £40 in 1990. It's what £40 was in 1991. Let's have a look at that. Show the amount there. So £90 for a game, which was a lot of money back then. It's a lot of money. And you're thinking, wow, £90. I'm going from what I was to that. So games then went up. Games like Streets of Rage 2 was £45, and the average Super Nintendo game was £45 in 1992. Let's show that. So £97. Games like Street Fighter 2 were £60. Show that amount. £130. People were paying £70 at launch for Street Fighter 2 Turbo, £151. £130 for Street Fighter 2 Turbo on import. That's £281 for a game. I didn't pay that much actually. But I did pay £80 for Ridge Racer Revolution in '95, and that cost me £161 for that game and one track. So you see how games back then, if you look at it on average, £40 in 1992. 86.66. So what were we getting for that price? We were getting a game that would be no save points generally. You completed the game in one sitting. Games could be completed in 2 hours, 3 hours, something like that, maybe less. But at the same time, how many times have I played through those games? Hundreds and hundreds of times. I can still go and play them today. They were so well made. There was a level of perfection in producing a lot of these games, and they were well tested. They weren't full of bugs like we have today. They were complete, polished, professional products. And yet, despite these games being so good, I think today people would probably look at them and say, I'm not paying for that. it's trash, it's only 2 hours long, I won't pay for that. And there's a different mindset. This is what kind of came into sort of affecting the mindset of gamers. But as the games market grew, you have to remember the industry was worth about 400 to 500 million pounds as an industry at that time. It's since become a £1 billion industry. The potential return on investment is very high if you can sell millions and millions of units. And depending on the publisher who you are, whether it's 1 million or 10 million, however many units you want to get. Now let's think about what a unit cost is for a moment. If a game is £39.99, its average unit cost years ago used to be around £25, £25.50, something like that. So then you've got to take off the distributor sum. So that's about £3, and then another distributor sum. So in the end, the publisher's getting about £15 out of a £40 game. That's how much the developer's probably getting. Not as much as people think. There's a lot of breakaways there. So in terms of technology, everything's increasing, and that's why now you've got people buying off-the-shelf technology solutions like Unreal Engine rather than developing their own. It saves them all kinds of budget in terms of R&D and developing their own technology. It's got hugely expensive, thousands of staff, and even though games have got more expensive to make, strangely they've gone down in price at the same time. So right now you're spending, people are spending £5, £10, £20, £30. They're complaining at a £20 game is too expensive sometimes. And it's kind of got the whole visual aspect of what a game is, what it costs for quality has kind of got lost. Now, when the Nintendo Switch 1 came out, I was a bit miffed at the pricing on the Switch 1 because I felt that they were charging effectively full price for games which in many cases, not from Nintendo, but from many cases were cut down budget versions of games you get on PS4 and Xbox One. And in that sense, I felt, well, you're kind of getting half the game, but you're paying virtually the same price, if not the same price on Switch 1 hardware. And I felt it wasn't value for the consumer. So that just didn't work. So the important thing at the moment is value for what you get. And now we get to this strange point now where we've got tons of shovelware coming onto the market, tons of broken games and trash. Everything's got early access now because everybody needs some cash to finish making their games, or just using the general public as free beta testers essentially to test their games. Nothing's ever feeling polished or complete now. So how do we change that? How do we move away from that? One of the ways of moving away from it is to increase the cost of games. So then you say, well, we need better people, we need better artists, we need better programmers, we need better testers. Testers are paid next to nothing. It's a joke what testers are paid and how they're treated, and yet they are essential to completing that polished game experience, to have the right people. I think that's where testing has kind of become a little bit of a conversation over the past few years, where is it game development or is it not game development? I think it really depends on the skill of the testers. If you get 20 people just to sit down and play a game and they've not really got anything to share, it's very different from having somebody who's tested thousands of games and really understands what they're doing. You can do it. It's like the difference between having some average Joe test your new car and having a Formula One driver test that car. There's leagues of difference in terms of understanding the car, the brakes, the tyres, the temperatures, all those elements in terms of what you're trying to fix or what a problem may be with your product. So what you get is what you pay for at the end of the day. And so now we look at Nintendo and they're raising the prices. And I look at the quality of the games. I looked at Donkey Kong, and I looked at Mario Kart and thought, I can see why. There's a level of polish and detail here that's just beyond other games that are on the market. They won't intend to release a broken game or a game that isn't finished. It has to be solid, it has to work well, it has to be completed a long way in advance to be tested so thoroughly, and ultimately it depends on whether it's of value to you. I'm not necessarily keen when I see people talking about emulating modern games. I think that kills the games industry, and I think that would do more harm to the industry than anything. But if you really don't want to pay for it, vote with your wallet. For me, the quality of a game isn't the problem. The real problem has been in loot boxes and the surrounding elements of microtransactions. They actually do more harm to the industry, in my perspective. So, for example, when you can spend an extra £50 on pay to win, £100 on pay to win, you damage the whole concept of the game. And when you have such a sort of a snobby industry around games like Fortnite, where the richest kids in this class at school have got the latest digital backpack. Yeah, they've got the latest this merchandise or that merchandise in the game. It's very cynical marketing, and that's a different way of the industry just making money and drawing money and causing an unevenness for everybody. I think gaming pricing needs to find a level and it needs to find a balance. And I think where Nintendo's concerned, they've found what they consider to be their marker. You will pay for their quality or you won't. They're not forcing you to pay for it. You don't have to buy it. If you don't like it, don't buy it. I think for those who want a quality game, I went out and I spent quite a lot of money on my Mega Drive games, on my Super Nintendo games, £50 for, in, what was it, 1993 for Super Empire Strikes Back. So £105, 65. Actually, I don't feel that these conversion rates show you the real value, because £50 was worth a lot more to us because you earned so much less in your jobs, so we were earning nothing back then. So it took a couple of months sometimes to save up, several months actually, even when you're working to buy some of these games and products. So it doesn't always show the balance, but either way, it feels like me the era's changing. And I see people complain sometimes about why can't we have it like we used to when we had all these really good games and the great years of the 90s and games were tested and games worked. Oh, but I don't want to pay for that. You end up with this balance now. Now, the next issue is going to be upgrade packs. This is where I think the more sensitive issue comes in. Nintendo have provided some updates, and it would be nice to see Switch 1 games running better on Switch 2. I think this is going to be the difficult area of how much would you pay for a basic upgrade pack, or how much would you pay for an upgrade pack with new features. Depends on what those features are. My feeling is that an upgrade pack, I'd say, Switch 2 accelerated game, £10. That'd be nice. Put in my Switch 1 game, get it accelerated, improved a bit, 120 FPS, resolution boost. Great, I'm good with that. New components. It depends on the new components, really, and whether it's £5 or £10 on top of that. I think that with Nintendo, they tend to put a lot of time and practice and effort into it in terms of the making sure everything's working really well. And it's very difficult to just put a number to it, but I think you can expect between £5 and £10. That, I'd say £10 for a basic update, or £20 for a significant update to the game. Everybody will see it differently. But when you go behind the scenes and you see the hundreds of staff working and the programmers that earn this much money a year and the artists that work this much money in the year, and then sometimes people often say to me, oh, but a modder could do this and a modder could do that. If a modder wishes to work unpaid, then so be it. But people actually do get paid in the real world. And then you bring your shareholders into it who want their money. Without shareholders, you haven't got no products. So in terms of finding a balance, it's always about trying to find a balance. But what really matters is the quality of the games. That's all that matters at the end of the day. Are we going to get quality games, quality game developers, awesome technologies, well tested, not riddled with bugs, games that work? And in that sense, Nintendo are standing quite firm in the level of quality that they've offered. So I think it's just a balance for you as viewers. I mean, for me, as I say, looking at these game prices, I've spent quite a bit on games over the years at different times. It's funny, people say about retro games, oh, you should have bought this or you should have bought that. And games were expensive years ago. And quite often the games that are worth more now are the ones that were terrible at the time, because people didn't buy those games, and therefore there weren't many produced, and therefore they're now worth a lot for people who are collectors and want to complete their collection. So if you bought some of the trash at the time, but then again you could have bought a lot of trash that is still worthless, and you're just left with a load of trash. So it's a balance for all of you. I mean, for me, games are so much cheaper these last few years, and I think years ago I used to import a lot of games in the late 90s. All my Dreamcast games, late 90s really for a lot of my Dreamcast, my Sega Saturn games, and they were all, roughly, let's put an average price of £70 on, in 1996. Let's go with that. So £137 a game. That was it. That's what I was paying for my games. So when it comes to expensive games these days, I will be selective. I won't buy all games like we didn't years ago. You have a handful of games. You buy a couple of games for Christmas, a couple of games for your birthday. And would it be better for the industry to go in a direction where we end up with more quality and less dross everywhere? I don't know. That really depends on who you talk to. I think as long as there's a balance of, like in the Amstrad where I started, $1.99 and $9.99. If we end up in a balance where you have the high quality games that cost a bit more, and they are actually high quality and you get what you pay for, good. And if you end up with, budget games where you want to spend, £10, £20, £30 on a game, but it's full of bugs and it really doesn't optimize the system performance, then buy that and you get what you pay for. We're in a changing time. We're in a changing industry. I think the world is changing right now. I think there are a lot of video game budgets out there that are simply unsustainable. They can't keep going like this and putting out games and losing tens of millions of euros or dollars every time a game doesn't do very well. It's not sustainable in the industry, and that's where Nintendo, they've not been putting out bad games. They just don't tend to put a foot wrong. They make a quality title. They do their R&D. They have the right people working for them. They're doing the right research. They're taking on the feedback from, you might not realize, but they take on all the feedback from all of your comments, and they do what they can. I think in terms of pricing, we'll just wait and see how it works out. I haven't got all the information on the physical games yet. Obviously, we saw about the key card stuff when you get the key card and it's not got the game on, downloads the game. But I still want to see all of that working in process. I have a few questions about that. I like the way Nintendo have got it so that if it's a multiplayer game, you don't all need to own that game. You can play that game with friends in certain cases. I think that's nice. And generally with Switch upgrades, I hope we do see quite a few mini upgrades to Switch performance on various older titles. But I think the first one that always jumped to mind was Kirby, which ran at 30 FPS, and it just does look lush now. It does look like a Switch 2 game. It really have brought it forward with lots of new elements. Sorry about the camera flickering. Problem with the recent Nvidia update, and it seems to have buggered the webcam, and I can't do anything about it. So one of those things. But yeah, it's more of a talking point. There's no right and wrong in this. You can disagree, and that's fine. I mean, there's a lot of people now who are just not going to buy the console, or they're not going to buy Nintendo games, and that's their choice. No one's forcing them to buy those games. You don't have to buy them. But I would like to hear your thoughts in the comments, and perhaps I'll come back to some of those in a future video as well. I think this is something we'll look at in the industry as it starts changing over the next couple of years, and we start seeing how this evolves not only on Nintendo systems but also on other formats as well, where people try and find a pricing model that works, especially for one-player games, because I think the MMO aspect and the big money made by the Fortnites of this world kind of moved all developers into thinking what we need is lots and lots of players online and all recording, making videos and everything else with our digital elements that they can charge for and get everybody buying all the time, and plus the play to win nonsense. And I don't think that's done the games industry any good. But yeah, that's from me. That's all it is from me on this chat. I look forward to your comments and catching up on some of those in a future video. But that's it from me for now. As ever, more soon.